You never think something like this could happen to you. You read about it, hear it in someone else's story, maybe even shake your head and think, that's rough. But then it's your life, and when it is, everything slows down. Every second feels stretched out, like the universe is giving you just enough time to feel every cut a little deeper. I met Rachel 6 years ago at a friend's birthday party. I wasn't even supposed to be there. I had a project deadline looming and half a cold, but my friend Matt wouldn't take no for an answer. He said I'd thank him later. Turns out he was right. Rachel was charming in that quiet, intelligent way. She had this ease about her, like she wasn't trying to impress anyone, and yet everyone seemed drawn to her. We talked for hours that night, tucked away on a balcony with cheap wine and city lights behind us. It felt easy, natural, like we'd known each other in another life. We got married after 2 years. It wasn't flashy, just close friends, family, and a backyard filled with fairy lights. I remember the way she looked walking down the aisle, her eyes locked on mine like the rest of the world didn't exist. In that moment, I thought, this is it. This is what peace feels like. The first few years were good, really good. We traveled. We built our careers. We talked about kids but never rushed. We were still growing, still learning how to be us, and I thought we were solid, I really did. But then there were little things. You know the kind. The small, almost invisible changes. The way she stopped asking me about my day. The way she flinched when I reached for her hand in public. The quiet. That kind of silence that isn't peaceful. It's heavy, like the calm before something breaks. I told myself she was just tired. Work had been hard on her. Long hours, stressful. Clients. I gave her space, I supported her, I made her tea at night and told her I was proud of her, that I loved her. She'd smile, say thanks, kiss my cheek, but it felt like kissing a ghost. Then one night, she came home later than usual. Her eyes were red, not the kind of red from crying, but like she'd been rubbing them, trying to hide something. I asked if everything was okay, and she nodded too quickly, said it was just a tough day. Then she walked straight into the bathroom and stayed there for nearly an hour. I sat in the living room pretending to scroll through my phone, pretending not to feel the wall growing between us. I didn't know what to do, so I did nothing. A few weeks later, she told me she was pregnant, and I smiled. God help me, I smiled, because despite everything, the distance, the confusion, I still loved her. I thought maybe this was it, the turning point. A baby could bring us back. A new beginning. We celebrated with dinner. I booked a weekend trip to the mountains. She laughed, genuinely laughed, for the first time in months. And for a moment, I let myself believe we were okay again. But something didn't sit right. It started with a date, just a tiny stupid detail. She said she was 8 weeks along, but that didn't make sense. You see, Rachel and I hadn't been intimate for nearly 3 months. We'd had a rough patch and I didn't push. I respected her space. I figured we'd find our way back to each other in time. 8 weeks. I did the math in my head over and over again, hoping I was wrong, hoping I forgot something. But the numbers stayed the same. And suddenly, everything made a sick kind of sense. The late nights, the distance, the nervous glances. The night she came home looking like she was unraveling, I didn't confront her, not right away. Instead, I went for a walk, for hours, through the park, past the coffee shop where we had our first date, down the street where she once danced in the rain just to make me laugh, and I thought, maybe it's a mistake, maybe she counted wrong, maybe I was wrong, but deep down, I already knew. The next morning, I asked her to go with me for a checkup. Just to make sure everything's good, I said. She hesitated, then agreed. We made the appointment for later that week. In those few days, I barely slept. Every second was a war in my mind, between the man who trusted her and the man who couldn't ignore the truth anymore. At the clinic, she held my hand. It felt cold. The doctor walked us through everything, took some blood, ran the usual tests. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Until he mentioned that she was further along than 8 weeks, almost 10, and just like that. Any tiny hope I had left cracked open and fell apart. 10 weeks. It wasn't mine. I didn't say anything right there. Not in front of the doctor. Not on the drive home. I just nodded, forced a smile, said all the right things while my heart bled, in silence. When we got home, she went upstairs. I stayed in the kitchen, holding onto the counter like it was the only thing keeping me standing. I wanted to scream, I wanted to cry, I wanted to shake her and ask, why? But more than that, I wanted to understand. I needed to hear it from her lips. I needed her to look me in the eyes and tell me the truth, even if it shattered me. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there next to her, the same woman I once promised forever to, staring at the ceiling while her breathing stayed soft and even, like nothing was wrong, like we weren't standing on the edge of something that couldn't be undone. Around 3 a.m. I got up and went downstairs, made some tea, not because I needed it, but because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. I just stood there in the dark kitchen, letting the steam fog up my glasses, my mind circling around one word: why? The next morning I didn't bring it up. I couldn't. Not yet. She was humming while slicing an apple, wearing one of my old shirts like it still meant something. There was something so normal about it that it felt cruel. I sat across from her, watching her move, wondering how many of those movements had become lies. After breakfast, I went to work but didn't get anything done. I stared at spreadsheets, answered a few emails, but mostly I kept seeing her face, hearing her laugh, replaying every moment of the last few months, trying to pinpoint the exact second everything changed. That night I finally asked, not with anger, not even suspicion, just quiet honesty. "Rachel," I said, "can I ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth?" She looked up slowly. Her face froze for half a second, then relaxed again. "Of course," she said, setting down her book. "When exactly did you find out you were pregnant?" She blinked. "A couple of weeks ago." "Why?" I nodded. "You said it's been 8 weeks, right?" A pause. Then she nodded again, slower this time. "Yeah, around that." I didn't press, I just looked at her, letting the silence do the asking. And then she broke. It was like watching a dam split down the middle. She dropped her gaze. Her lip trembled. Her hands folded into each other on her lap. "I was going to tell you," she whispered. That sentence, those 5 words, hit harder than a confession. Because it wasn't just about what happened. It was about the lie she chose to live inside, hoping I wouldn't see the cracks. "How long?" I asked. She stayed quiet. "How long, Rachel?" She swallowed hard. "It was just one night. I swear, it wasn't supposed to happen." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. My chest felt tight, like something heavy had settled right beneath my ribs. "Who?" I asked. She hesitated, and that hesitation was another cut. "Someone from work," she finally said. "We were at a conference, there was too much wine, we talked, and one thing led to another." I turned away, not because I was angry, though God knows I was, but because I didn't want her to see my face twist in pain. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she went on, "and after, I felt horrible. I thought it was done, that it was behind me. Then I missed my period. I prayed it was yours, I wanted it to be yours." I looked at her then, really looked, and all I saw was a stranger wearing my wife's skin. "You should have told me the moment you found out," I said. She nodded, wiping at her eyes. "I know. I was scared. I didn't want to lose you. But you already lost." "Me," I said softly. "You just didn't notice." She reached out, her fingers brushing mine. "Please, we can get through this. We can raise the baby together. You're still the man I want to be with." I pulled my hand away. I don't know if I can be that man anymore. For a few days after that, we barely spoke. We moved through the house like ghosts, 2 people bound by a shared history and a child that wasn't mine. I slept on the couch. She stopped humming in the mornings. Then one evening, she sat beside me and said, "I'll do a paternity test if you want. I want to be honest from now on." I nodded, and so we did. We went to the clinic a week later. Blood was drawn, forms were signed, and then came the waiting. Those days were the hardest. Not because I didn't already know, but because some tiny, foolish part of me still hoped, still clung to the idea that maybe fate wasn't this cruel, that maybe I'd wake up from this nightmare and find out I was just a paranoid husband. But I wasn't. The results came in 3 days later, and they confirmed what I already knew. "The baby wasn't mine," Rachel cried. She begged, said she'd do anything, said this didn't have to be the end. That love was more than biology, but I couldn't hear her anymore. Not really, because something inside me had shifted. A line had been crossed, a truth had been uncovered, and there was no burying it again. I wasn't angry anymore, not even bitter, just tired. Tired of pretending we were still something we weren't. Tired of carrying someone else's guilt. Tired of wondering what part of my life was real, and what part was just something I wanted to believe. I told her I needed time, that I was going to stay with a friend for a while. She didn't fight it, just stood at the door as I packed a small bag, her hands wrapped around her stomach, eyes red but dry. Before I left, she asked, "Will you come back?" "I don't know." I moved into Matt's guest room that night. It was strange, sleeping in a room that wasn't mine, in a bed that didn't remember the weight of our shared past. But somehow, it felt easier to breathe there. Matt didn't ask questions. He just handed me a beer, said, "Take the time you need," and left me alone. I spent the first few days just existing, waking up late, walking aimlessly, staring at my phone but not answering messages. Rachel texted a few times, short messages filled with hesitation. "I miss you. Thinking of you. Please talk to me." I didn't respond. Couldn't. Because what do you say to someone who shattered you and then asks if the pieces still fit? I started going back to the gym. Not because I suddenly cared about fitness, but because I needed something to do with the restlessness inside me. I'd push through the weight sets like I was trying to force the anger out of my body. Sweat became a kind of penance, a way to feel like I was reclaiming control over something, anything. One evening, after a particularly long run, I sat on a bench outside the building and watched the sky fade from orange to deep blue. That's when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Rachel. "Can we talk? Just once, not to fix things, just to say what we need to say." I stared at it for a while. Then, without replying, I drove back to the house. She was already waiting. She'd lit a candle on the table and made tea, just like I used to. She wore the old navy sweater I loved, the one she always said was too big, but wore anyway because it made her feel safe. We sat in silence for a while. The kind that used to feel comfortable. Now it just felt heavy. "I'm not going to beg," she said finally. "I know I've lost your trust, maybe forever. But I need you to know, I never stopped loving you." I looked at her, tired, cautious. "You say that, but you chose someone else." "It wasn't love," she said quickly. "It wasn't even about him. It was about me. Feeling invisible, stupid, I know. But things had felt off for months." We stopped talking. I felt like I was fading, I wanted to argue. To tell her that she could have said something, that I was right there the whole time. But I didn't. Because deep down I knew she wasn't entirely wrong. We both had drifted, only difference was I didn't betray her while we were lost. "Even so," I said, "what you did wasn't a mistake. It was a decision." She nodded, slowly. "I know." She took a deep breath. "I've decided to keep the baby. I'm not expecting anything from you, but I wanted you to hear it from me." I just nodded. I had no words left for this version of our life. We sat for a while, longer. Then I stood up. "I don't hate you," I said, "but I can't be with you." Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't cry, and I appreciated that, because for the first time in weeks there was no performance, just truth. I left that night knowing something had shifted in me, something that wasn't coming back. Over the E. Next few weeks I started rebuilding my life. Slowly Matt introduced me to a few new people, a mix of co-workers, friends from his photography club. That's how I met Claire. She wasn't flashy. She didn't try to fill space with loud laughter or bold opinions, but she listened. She really listened. The way Rachel used to, back when things were good. We started meeting for coffee, just conversations at first. She never pushed, never asked too much. Just offered small moments of kindness, an encouraging smile, a warm silence, a shared story. It wasn't romantic, not at first, but it was healing. And somewhere in that healing, I began to remember who I was outside of the wreckage. The man I had been before suspicion crept in, the version of me who still believed in something better. Rachel texted once more, a long message this time. Apologies, reflections, words that felt like pages from a diary she'd kept locked for too long. She ended with, "I hope one day you find peace, and maybe someone who never makes you question your worth." I didn't reply, not because I hated her, but because she was right. Some things don't need a reply. Some things are simply endings. One night, as Claire and I sat under the stars with takeout and cheap wine, she asked, "Do you believe people can change?" I thought about Rachel, about myself, about the man I used to be. And I said, "I think people change when the pain of staying the same becomes unbearable." She smiled. "That's a heavy answer." It's been a heavy year. Claire didn't ask for details. She didn't need to. She just reached over and placed her hand on mine, and for the first time in months, I didn't pull away. Months passed. Life didn't get easier, it just got quieter. There was a strange kind of peace in the routine I had now. Work, gym, the occasional weekend hike with Claire. I wasn't healed, not fully, but I wasn't broken anymore either. I'd moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Clean walls, my books, my music, my silence. Rachel hadn't contacted me since that last message, and I hadn't reached out either. Part of me assumed she had moved on with her life, maybe even started something with the father of her child. But the truth? I didn't want to know. I was finally learning to live in the present, until one evening she showed up. It was almost 7 p.m. I had just come back from a run, sweat still clinging to my shirt, breath still heavy, when I heard the knock, and there she was. Rachel, standing in the hallway of my building, looking smaller than I remembered, paler. Her hair was pulled back into a loose bun, and her eyes, those eyes that used to light up every room, looked tired. Lost. "Hi," she said softly. I didn't say anything, just waited. I wasn't sure if I should come, but I didn't know how else to say it. I stepped aside, silent, letting her in, not because I was ready, but because something in her expression told me this wasn't just a social call. She walked in slowly, almost reverently, as if the space around her didn't quite belong to her. She didn't sit. "I had the baby," she said quietly. I blinked. "You didn't tell me." "I didn't think you'd want to know." I stayed silent. She nodded. "His name is Ezra." Ezra. There was a time I would have helped pick that name. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. "This is just some things, a photo, his birth certificate. I thought maybe you'd want to see him just once." I took the envelope but didn't open it. Not yet. Rachel stood there, hesitating, like she was trying to find the right moment to fall apart. Then she said, "He looks nothing like you." It was a strange thing to say. Honest, maybe too honest. But I understood what she meant. "He cries a lot," she continued. "Won't sleep unless someone sings to him. I'm tired all the time. I barely eat. And the man who fathered him, he left as soon as I told him." She paused. "I know I deserve this. I know this is the part where I pay for what I did." I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time, I didn't feel pain or anger. I felt distance. We were no longer the same people. We hadn't been for a long time. "I'm not here to ask you to come back," she said. I wanted you to see that I'm trying, that I've changed." "You say that like it matters now," I replied, not unkindly. "I know it doesn't," she said quickly. "But maybe it will matter to you one day that I didn't just run away from the mess I made." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something small, an old leather keychain. "My initials. You left this," she said, placing it on the table. "The day you walked out." I didn't touch it. She stood in the silence, waiting for something. Forgiveness, maybe. Closure. Some kind of validation that she still mattered. But I had none to give. "I hope Ezra grows up to be a better man than I was," she said softly. "I hope I raise him right. And I hope, someday, he understands what I lost." And then she turned and left. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving only the echo of her words in the air. I sat down, the envelope still in my hands. After a moment I opened it. Inside was a photograph. Rachel holding a small baby, his eyes wide and unknowing. I stared at that picture for a long time. Then I slid it back into the envelope, sealed it, and placed it in a drawer. Not because I didn't care, but because that chapter was closed. What Rachel didn't know, what no one did, was that while she was figuring out motherhood, I had been building something of my own. A startup I'd quietly nurtured over the past year. An idea born from long nights' pain and the need to make something mine again. It had started as a journal, just writing, then turned into a blog, then a community. Men who had gone through what I had. Stories like mine. Anger like mine. Growth like mine. Now it was gaining traction. Investors. Public attention. And I wasn't just the founder, I was the face of it. My story had gone viral in one forum, a vulnerable post, written late one night, recounting everything. People had shared it, related to it, called it brave. I hadn't meant for that to happen, but maybe that was the plan all along, not to expose Rachel, not to shame her, but to reclaim me. Claire knew, of course. She was the first person I told. She read every draft I wrote, listened to every revision, held my hand when I almost gave up. She never judged, never pitied me. She just stayed. And that, more than anything, reminded me what love could look like when it wasn't broken. A few weeks after Rachel's visit, something strange happened. I received a message, an email actually, from a local journalist. Her tone was polite, professional. She said she'd come across my blog through a friend and found the content incredibly raw and important. She asked if I'd consider doing a small interview. Nothing fancy, just an online piece about healing after betrayal. At first, I hesitated. I wasn't trying to be anyone's spokesperson. I wasn't looking for attention. I'd built the blog for myself and maybe for the handful of people who needed to know they weren't alone. That was enough. But Claire said something that stuck with me. She said, "Sometimes telling your story out loud isn't about moving on. It's about making sure no one else stays stuck where you were." So I said yes. The article went live 2 weeks later. The title was simple but powerful, "The Man Who Chose Healing Over Revenge." It wasn't sensational. It didn't name names. It didn't drag Rachel into the spotlight, but it told the truth, my truth. The story of a man who loved, was betrayed and rebuilt himself, quietly, deliberately, without burning everything down. I didn't expect what happened next. The article blew up. Hundreds of shares, thousands of comments. Messages from strangers, some thanking me, others sharing their own stories. Men, women, even therapists who said they were using my words in support groups. And then, one evening, my phone rang. Rachel. I let it go to voicemail, but the next day, she called again and again. Finally, I picked up. Her voice was shaking. "I read it," she said. I didn't respond. "You wrote about us." "I wrote about me," I corrected, "about what I lived through. You made me sound like the villain. I let that sit in the air. I didn't use your name, Rachel. But people know. People at my job are talking. They're guessing. I didn't tell them anything they couldn't have figured out themselves." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something I didn't expect. "I'm scared." And for the first time, I heard something real in her voice. Not guilt, not regret. Fear. "The blog? It's everywhere. I went in for a meeting this morning and my manager asked if I was okay. People are whispering. Some are avoiding me altogether." I said nothing. She went on, her words tumbling out faster now. "Do you want to ruin me? Is that what this is about? Some slow revenge?" "No," I said simply. "This isn't about you. It never was." "Then why now? Why this?" "Because I lived in silence long enough and I refuse to pretend anymore." There was another long pause, and then, in the softest voice, she said, "You're not the same person." "No," I agreed, "I'm not." What Rachel didn't know was that this wasn't just a fluke article. This was the beginning of something much bigger. The startup I'd been building, Mend, was gaining momentum fast. A support platform for men navigating betrayal, grief and rebuilding. Online forums, counseling resources, even small group meetups. Investors had started calling. Therapists had asked to collaborate, and I was now being invited to speak at panels and conferences, sharing not just my story, but what came after. Rachel wasn't just witnessing a blog post go viral, she was watching the man she'd betrayed become stronger than she ever expected, and I could feel it in her voice, the trembling, the realization. She hadn't just lost a husband, she'd lost a man who turned his pain into purpose. That night, I opened the drawer where I'd kept Ezra's photo. For the first time, I allowed myself to look at it without bitterness. A child shouldn't carry the weight of his parents' sins. I whispered a quiet wish for him, that he'd grow up knowing love even if it didn't come from me. I didn't need to fight Rachel anymore. She was already fighting herself. What mattered now was the future mine, and maybe, just maybe, Claire would be part of that too. We weren't official, not yet. But there was something in the way she looked at me that told me she saw not the man who had been broken, but the man who had chosen to rebuild. And I think that's what frightened Rachel the most. Not that I had moved on, but that I had leveled up, quietly, gracefully, without needing to destroy her. It was a Thursday afternoon when the invitation came. A colleague of mine, Thomas, had organized a charity gala for mental health awareness, an event that brought together psychologists, tech entrepreneurs, community leaders, and a few public figures who had experienced personal battles and found a way through. He asked if I would give a speech. "I want you to close the night," he said. "Your story, the way you carry it, it's honest but powerful. People need to hear it." I hesitated at first. I wasn't sure if I wanted to stand on a stage and relive what I'd been through, but Claire encouraged me like she always did, with quiet belief, no pressure. "You don't have to talk about her," she said. "Just talk about you. Talk about what came after." So I said yes. The night arrived. I wore a navy suit, nothing too flashy. Just clean, sharp, like the man I'd fought to become. The hall was full, almost 200 people dressed in black and gold. I stood in the wings while the host read my intro. "Our final speaker tonight is the founder of Mend, a platform helping men navigate pain, betrayal, and growth. He's here to share not just his story, but his recovery." As I stepped onto the stage, the lights felt warm, calming. I took a deep breath, and I began. I never thought I'd be the kind of man who got left behind. That first sentence always lands heavy, but life has a way of humbling you. When you think love is enough, when you think trust is unbreakable, sometimes it takes losing everything you thought was real to find the person you were meant to become. I didn't speak with bitterness. I spoke with truth. I told the audience about the betrayal, not the details, but the emotional unraveling. I talked about the sleepless nights, the couch that became my home, the silence that became my companion. And then I told them what came next. The rebuilding. The long walks. The first time I made coffee without crying. The night Claire placed her hand on mine and I didn't pull away. The audience was quiet, not bored, engaged. You could feel the weight of their listening, and I ended it simply. I used to think closure came from answers, but now I know. Closure is what happens when the story no longer controls you. Applause long standing. I stepped off the stage, heart full, lungs light, and that's when I saw her, Rachel, standing near the back of the room. She looked stunned, pale, like she'd wandered into a memory she wasn't ready for. I didn't know she'd be there. Someone must have forwarded the invite. Maybe she came out of curiosity or guilt, or both. She walked toward me slowly, carefully weaving through the crowd as if unsure whether she belonged. "Hi," she said, almost breathless. I nodded. "I didn't know you were this, all of this. You never said." "You never asked." She looked down, then up again. "You were incredible. What you said us, it was so strong, so clear." I said nothing. "Everyone was listening to you. Like you mattered." That sentence told me everything. She hadn't come to reconnect. She came because for the first time she saw me the way she never had. Not as the man who stayed, but the man who grew. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a small card. I started writing too. A few things, for mums, single mums. I was thinking maybe I could help too. I took the card, read it. Her name, a link to a small website. Rachel's journal, Finding Light. I nodded. Good for you. She bit her lip. Would you maybe be open to talking sometime? Not as anything more. Just two people who once loved each other. I paused, then handed the card back to her. No, I said gently. I think you need to write your story without needing me to edit it. Her face fell, and then twist, the moment that sealed everything. Just over her shoulder, Claire appeared. She had just come from outside, where she'd been helping with event photos. She saw Rachel and offered a soft smile, polite, graceful, but grounded. Then she stepped beside me, her hand naturally finding mine. Rachel saw it. Her eyes flicked down. And in that second, I saw everything. The regret, the realization, the loss. Not because I was cruel, but because life had answered her question far more clearly than I ever could. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need revenge. I just needed to keep walking forward until she became nothing more than a chapter I'd finished reading. Rachel left quietly. Claire looked at me and asked, "You okay?" I nodded. More than okay. And I meant it. The morning after the gala, I woke up to light streaming through the curtains. Claire was still asleep beside me, her hand gently resting on my chest, rising and falling with each breath. There was something about that moment. Stillness, warmth, presence that reminded me how far I'd come. I used to wake up in silence and dread. Now I woke up in peace. The night before had been a turning point. Not just because I had stood on a stage and told my truth, not because I had seen Rachel again, but because something inside me had shifted, finalized. There was no more weight in my chest when I thought of her, no more questions, no more what-ifs. I got up quietly, brewed 2 cups of coffee, and stepped out onto the balcony. The city was still half asleep, just the soft hum of early buses and the occasional dog bark cutting through the air. Claire joined me a few minutes later, hair messy, hoodie too big. She sipped her coffee and leaned against me. "You were brilliant." "Last night," she said. I smiled. I was honest. "Same thing," she replied. We stood there for a while, saying nothing, watching a new day unfold. Then my phone buzzed. It was an email. "From Rachel." I hesitated. Claire noticed. "You don't have to read it if it brings you back." "I'm not going back," I said, then opened it. It was short. "Thank you for not hating me. Thank you for becoming the kind of man I wish I'd seen when I had the chance. Ezra will know about you, not from bitterness, but from truth. You don't owe me anything, but if someday you want to meet him, the door's open. I'm letting go now. I hope you are too." I stared at the message for a while, and then I deleted it, not from anger, from peace. Because sometimes closure isn't about responding. It's about knowing you no longer need to. That weekend, Claire and I took a trip out to the coast, just the 2 of us, no phones, no work. We walked barefoot. On the sand, ate bad diner food and stayed up late talking about dreams, not wounds. At one point, as we watched the waves roll in, she asked me, "Do you regret anything?" I thought about that for a moment. There had been a time when the answer would have been yes. Regret for trusting too deeply, regret for not seeing the signs, regret for not walking away sooner. But now? "No," I said, "because every scar led me here." Claire smiled, nodded, and I knew she understood, because that's what healing really looks like. Not pretending it didn't happen, not erasing the pain, but standing tall despite it, learning to carry it differently. In the months that followed, men continued to grow. We added more resources, more voices, stories from men around the world who had lived through their own heartbreaks and emerged stronger. It wasn't just a platform anymore, it was a movement. One evening, I was invited to speak at a university. The topic was resilience and rebuilding. Afterward, a young man approached me, barely 22, nervous, soft-spoken. He said, "I read your story and I was in a really dark place, but it gave me hope. I just wanted you to know that." I thanked him, and as he walked away, something in me softened because that was it. That was the reason I'd gone through all of it. Not to become famous, not to get back at anyone, but to mean something. To someone. One night, as Claire and I sat on the couch curled under a blanket, she turned to me and asked, "Do you think love is about timing or choice?" I thought for a while, then said, "I think it's about seeing someone clearly and choosing them anyway." She looked at me, smiled, and kissed my forehead. Not everything in life ends with fireworks. Sometimes it ends with stillness, with a quiet knowing that the storm is over and that you, against all odds, are still here.